All right, so main story today is something that happened a couple weeks ago, but I feel like it's a big enough story that we should talk about it. And that is the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences has changed its voting rules for the film release year 2020 for the Oscars that will be in 2021. A couple major things that took place and some minor adjustments that have also taken place here too. So we'll cover the big one, I think, which is that the Academy has temporarily suspended its rule that a film must complete a qualifying run in theaters for at least 7 consecutive days with at least 3 showings daily. That was kind of the original ruling. Your film had to play 7 consecutive days with at least 3 shows every day. Um, so that's why you'd have to have The Irishman dedicated for like 12 hours. Um, so that rule has temporarily been suspended. I know a lot of people are kind of coming out and saying like it's a permanent thing. It is temporary, and I believe it will be for this year or until this crisis is averted. So we'll kind of have to see how the year goes with health and with the way that our world is kind of set up and run, and see where it goes from there. But that is a major change actually, and one that I wasn't entirely sure they were going to make. Now, they did have a couple caveats there. The film must be made available on the Secure Academy Screening Room members only streaming site within 60 days of the film's streaming or VOD release. Um, Now, this also, I gotta say, this also only affects films that had planned releases, including theatrical windows. I'm not entirely sure how they would enforce that because there's oftentimes throughout the year, smaller films will get a release window announced only to have like within months, not exactly years out. We talk about these big tentpole films. We talk about like Marvel dropping like 4 release dates in 2027. For upcoming Marvel releases. Those films get placed long in advance. No, not 2027, but they do get placed long in advance. Whereas you have smaller films, the ones that usually do get the more prestige, Academy Award discussion, get placed in there as well. So I think I'm not sure how you would police that, but it's an interesting idea, and it makes sense too. But at the same time, most films that didn't get a theatrical window are probably not looking for Oscars anyway. So, but maybe it's just to limit the amount that Academy members have to search for films. I think it just kind of again like creates a smaller grouping. As much as it irks me, it's a necessary thing. But this was a question I had ever since Universal, which we talked about last week. Ever since Universal made Trolls World Tour a digital release. The reason for that being that I'm not big on. I'm not really big on the first Trolls movie, but I think that I do think that we have Trolls World Tour being a release that could be up for Oscars. There's a lot of music in it. Most of it's not original, but there could be an original song. There's Academy or animated. There's animated levels that it could hit for best animated feature because some years we get a lot of animated films that are great. Some years we don't. Reviews have been pretty good for Trolls World Tour, so I thought like moving it off of this like that prestige could really help World Tour out. And then Warner Brothers, I believe, had planned on releasing Scoob in theaters. They adjusted that as well to an online VOD release. And I think those kinds of films, animated films, family films, are the ones that are going to do better during this particular time. As I said last week, I think you're more willing to drop the $20 rental fee if it'll get your kids to quiet down for 2 hours. So that's just what it is. I like these rules. I think these are good rules. I think they probably have been thinking about this ever since the first case hit the U.S. The Academy has probably been working through this idea. So this rule change of suspending the theatrical window, I think, can work, especially when you have the 3 months early on in the year when films were getting good. I still loved The Invisible Man. I really enjoyed Bad Boys for Life. The Gentleman was great. There were some good movies that have come out early on in the year, but there's not enough to really have a best picture window that's going to be strong. And if we don't get a normal theatrical experience until the end of the year or maybe in 2021, this is an important concession the Academy can make that doesn't really affect them all that much. And in fact, if I were a member of the Academy, I'd be pretty excited about that because they'd start to get some movies that they can actually watch without having to drop some cachet. Other changes, we can talk about a couple of those as well. But they combined sound mixing and sound editing into best sound. And correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong about this, but I do believe. Oh, hi, cat. I do believe that best sound was a category some time ago, and it got separated into mixing and editing. I may be wrong about that, but I believe that's the case. So best sound combined. I think here's the thing: people don't understand the difference between best sound editing and best sound mixing. And I think to the casual listener, it kind of sounds like sound. Like it is best sound. And I know in previous years there have been cases of two films or the same film winning both awards where people are like, it's the loudest, it's the noisiest, it's the one with the most sound. Give it to that. Or you get people that vote for two separate films not knowing the difference between them just because they can celebrate two different movies that they were kind of torn on. So again, like, I like the idea of multiple films being recognized, but I also believe that this is a good sign. It will shorten the show, even if a few minutes. But it's also important to note, too, that this rule actually was brought to the Academy by the sound department. The collection of sound people that worked there came to the Academy and they said, we want to combine these into one. And I think that was a strong move on their part. Very respectful, and I like that they got to make the call for themselves, too. One other big change that happened, Best Music, Best Score, of course, has adjusted their rules that the film must contain 60% original music to qualify. In the case of franchise films, it must contain 80% original music. And I think that's kind of an odd adjustment. I like the 60% original music thing. I think that works. But the 80% for a franchise film, which I find very strange overall. Hey, there's my cat. Here's Spike. Hi, everyone. So I think the 80% for franchise film is really weird because how can you really qualify a franchise film? Like, how can you really say that this is a franchise film, but this isn't? As it breaks down, like with a series like The Conjuring, do the individual pieces of that cinematic universe count as franchise films, or is it just all three Annabelle films, the two Conjuring films? In the case of Marvel, do they, quantify the different superheroes and each one of them as their own franchise, or is the Marvel Cinematic Universe its own franchise? The DCEU, is that kind of the case as well? Like, now, granted, most of these films would have different franchise, like, they would have different scores anyway, but still, it's kind of an odd ruling to place for it. I mean, 60% should just be 60% across the board. Why 80% for it? I don't know. Maybe this will become clearer to me down the road, but I just think it's an odd thing. One final rule change that they made, and they made some few other ones too, but these are the ones I think are worth talking about. All members are allowed to participate in the preliminary round for Best International Feature. So here's kind of how the nomination process works, and bear with me because I kind of know this stuff, but each individual department of a film is responsible for nominating the nominations of that department. So for Best Sound, your sound engineers, anyone in sound work, nominates those films, and then the collective Academy votes for the winner. That's why you might get smaller films, is that if someone, like if you get, who's going to know sound better than the sound guys to pick the 5 films that you decide from? Who's going to know better than the special effects guys as to which are the best special effects of the year? Same thing with original score. There's an acting branch which does actor and supporting actor. I think it's acting, supporting actor, actress, and supporting actress. I think all 4 is under that as well. The only ones that are kind of on their own are the best film kind of ones. Best picture. I don't know if best animated feature or documentary. I think that's the documentary branch and the animated branch that do that. And then now best international feature will not be done by a select group. It will be all members that are allowed to participate in that, which I think is good. I think it's another thing that's going to broaden the number of accessible films, because I don't think you have to know international films to know what international film you like. And I think with this year's win for Parasite, that's kind of a cool adjustment that I think is really going to help. So overall, some good changes that were made for this year. The only real, temporary one is that suspension of the rule for theatrical windows. Sound editing, sound mixing combined, I think works. Best music, I like the idea of the 60%. Don't really understand the 80% for franchise films. It's almost like kind of pushing those out. And then what constitutes like original music in that case, because Rise of Skywalker, for example, John Williams was very vocal that he used every single theme from every single Star Wars film while writing the music. But since they were newly written and newly orchestrated, and does that not count at all because The Rise of Skywalker was nominated? So it's really that's an odd voice for me. And then all members being able to participate in the preliminary voting rounds for Best International Feature. That's a good rule. I like that one too. So I want to know, guys, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's a good idea to suspend that theatrical window, or should they be standing with the theaters and NATO and saying, no, we believe in the theatrical experience? It's only temporary. So, kind of what do you guys think about that? Same thing with the best sound editing and mixing. Should they be combined? Should they be kept separate? I want to hear your thoughts on that. Best music. Do you guys kind of understand that 80% rule? Maybe you can provide some insight if you're more inclined to scores than I am. And do you think it's a good idea for the members to be able to participate in that preliminary round of Best International Feature? I want to know your thoughts. So comment below and let me know.